I'm so excited to bring to y'all the birth story today of our fourth little baby. We had a son, so our family was so excited to add another boy to our household. His birth was probably the most similar to my last birth, which I'll talk about the similarities, but it was also very unique in its own way. So he is almost 2 weeks old now at this point of recording. I've tried to film this video a couple of times now, but something always comes up when I get started or I get interrupted, and we just haven't gotten it filmed yet. Thankfully, as always, I take notes during my births just so I can remember things that are easily forgettable after the birth happened. Okay, so to start out, on Friday before he was born, I was having period-like menstrual cramps, and I thought, okay, this is new. I've had Braxton Hicks for like the last 3 weeks, and I was like, okay, this is new, so maybe we'll have a baby this weekend. And that actually didn't happen. So I had continued having a very tight stomach, Braxton Hicks, on and off all weekend. Period-like cramps, just kind of feeling blah. Went to bed early all of those nights. I think my body was just letting me know I needed to get some rest to prepare for his upcoming birth. So then Saturday, I wrote down I started feeling like that cervical dilation pain. Now this is something that's hard to describe if you don't know what you're looking for to feel. But it's almost just like a pain in your cervix of it starting to dilate. It's really hard to describe. If you've experienced that, let us know in the comments if you've also experienced that kind of sharp, not really pain, but that sharp feeling of your cervix starting to dilate. Or at least that's what I describe it as. So then Sunday night, we had kind of a busy afternoon after church. We were doing the last few things in the garden, trying to get some more green beans put up, trying to get trellises for the cucumbers put up, the tomatoes. And then, so we had a later evening. The kids didn't get to bed till close to 8 or 8:30. So my husband and I didn't get to bed until 10 o'clock, I wrote down. And at 10 o'clock, when I lay down to go to sleep, I had my first true contraction. Now, the way I describe the first contraction, so you know it's a real contraction, is it kind of just, you feel it come from the top of your uterus, like all the way down. And it's not, those aren't painful at that point, but it's more than just a cramp. It's more like this movement, this wave, this flow of your body starting to literally contract, your uterus starting to squeeze down, contract so that baby can be born. So that was at 10 o'clock on Sunday night. So I was really excited. I didn't tell my husband because I just wanted to see what things happened. So at this point in my mind, I was thinking, okay, it's 10 p.m. All of my last 2 labors were 10 hours and 14 hours. So we should have a baby by the next mid-morning. And I was really excited. I was like, okay, I'll labor through the night, early labor. I'll go into active labor in the morning. My kids can be awake. Hopefully we can get into the pool and my kids can be there for the birth. That was my dream. So I was thinking that was going to happen. So my daughter, my youngest daughter at that time, woke me up crying in her bedroom. She never wakes up at night. So it was really rare that she woke up that night at 11:30. So I went upstairs to put her back to sleep. And as I was laying in the bed, kind of like singing her back to sleep, patting her back to sleep, had another contraction at 11:30. So we had an hour and a half between that I noticed having a contraction, but when you're drifting in and out of sleep, those early contractions, sometimes you don't even wake up for. Had another one at 11:50, 12:30, 1 o'clock. So you can tell I was up on and off throughout that night, being woken up by these mild contractions. 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 5:30. So I was really excited to wake up and tell my husband that I'd been having contractions through the night and that we might have a baby that morning. But I had anticipated that those early labor contractions would be a lot more intense by the morning time since I'd been having them all night long, but they were not. So on this particular morning, my husband woke up at 5:30, which is why I woke up at 5:30. I remember having a very mild contraction while he was getting dressed to head out to the garden. Again, I had still not told him anything just yet because I didn't want to get super excited and get it worked up in my head before I knew if anything was actually going to happen that day. So he headed out to the garden to do some harvesting before we milked the cow. So I was going to get ready, get a couple things done in the kitchen, and then head out to milk and tell him then that I'd been having contractions and that I might not be able to help milk if I was having a contraction, might not be able to sit there through the milking. Well, that was my plan. So I headed out to milk between 5:30 and 6. I had not had another contraction. started milking, still had not had another contraction. So at this point I was like, okay, maybe I'm not gonna have any more. Let me just not say anything just yet. We went through milking. Now this was an eventful milking morning. It was the first time our cow kicked over the bucket. There was a horsefly. She kicked, her foot went into the milk bucket. So it was a really chaotic milking session. So I was actually glad I was not having contractions through all of that. So the morning continued on, made breakfast, he went off to work. I still did not tell him I'd been having those contractions of the night because it had now been almost 2 hours and I had not had another contraction. So okay, things are just gonna stand still probably throughout the day while I get some things done. The kids are about to be awake, or the kids were already awake as he headed off to work, and we just went on with our morning. So it was kind of a busy morning. I was working on green beans to harvest still. We were trying to finish the last of the green beans before baby came. So looking back, I'm actually glad I wasn't having contractions that morning because it was such a busy, kind of chaotic morning. And honestly, that was probably my body's way of saying, things are too chaotic, things are too stressful right now, we don't need to go into labor, because your body is so smart, it will not go into labor if you're stressed out, if there's a lot of chaos, if there's a lot of busyness. Or at least myself, I need to be relaxed and knowing that my family is safe, I am safe, I'm not being rushed for my body to fully kick into labor, or at least as in my last few experiences. So at 12:30 p.m., I was sitting down for lunch with my kids and I had another contraction. Now it had been 7 hours since my contraction that morning in the bed before the milking. So I was really excited. I was like, okay, they're coming back. So that was at 12:30. And then I went to wash the dishes after lunch. And a lot of times when my kids will be playing outside or they're playing in their playroom, I'll put on a YouTube video or a podcast and just listen to that while I wash the dishes. It's kind of like a peaceful time. So I opened up the YouTube app and the first video that came up was from the Built to Birth channel, which I don't watch often. I do follow that channel, but I don't watch it like often for it to be recommended to me all the time. But the video that was recommended to me, the Miles circuit to kick into active labor. And I was like, well, this is ironic. This should not probably just be a coincidence. The Lord is probably trying to show me something that I should maybe try to get things kick-started for labor. So I didn't take that as just a coincidence. I watched the video as I was washing the dishes and immediately put the kids to quiet time and started doing the Miles circuit. So if you aren't familiar with the Miles circuit, it is 3 techniques, 3 movements that you do to help baby move down in the pelvis, kind of kickstart active labor if you've been in kind of a long early labor phase. Now, I didn't really know how far along I was in labor at that point because it had just been on and off most of the morning. But I was like, okay, this is popping up on a video. I'm going to do this Miles circuit. So I put my daughter to sleep. I was laying in the bed with her. I did the first movement of the Miles circuit. So you're supposed to do each movement for 30 minutes. This first one was laying on hands and knees. And I just laid in her bed and like patted her to sleep, sang her to sleep, and did that for 30 minutes. Then I headed back down, did the next step of the Miles circuit, and for the next 30 minutes. And the last one is doing some movement exercises where you're doing some lunges, you do some walking. So I did all of that, needless to say. That was between like 1 o'clock and 2:30. And between all of that, I was having some very, very still mild contractions. So at that point, I texted my husband and said, okay, I'm having a few contractions. Maybe we're gonna have a baby today. So he was really excited. He was like, do I need to come home from work? I was like, no, it's still very early. Just finish out your day. So at 3:30, I was like any other laboring mom. I decided to clean the house. I mopped the floors, vacuumed, mopped the floors, got everything cleaned up and tidied in case we were gonna have people over the next few days. And then at 4:15, I started dinner. It was a very easy dinner because in my mind, I was thinking, okay, if I'm gonna go into labor, if things are gonna pick up, I don't wanna be trying to cook dinner at 6 o'clock. Going through contractions, trying to get dinner made. So I made a really simple dinner. We ate. After dinner, we headed back out to the garden. We were just moving on with our day as usual. I was having contractions. At this point, I was having to stop a little bit and just kind of sway or breathe through them. I wasn't able just to continue whatever I was doing, but by no means were they difficult at this point. And I should mention that my contractions this whole time were only lasting about 20 to 40 seconds. They were still very short contractions. I remember thinking that I wish they would get longer, I wish they would get closer together, but my body knew what it needed to do, so I just was patient with it and trusting it through the process. So after dinner, we headed out to the garden. I finished helping my husband hang some trellises for the cucumbers, got animal troughs watered, got everything settled in for the night, and then headed in around 6:30 8:30 to get a shower. So I got into bed at 7 o'clock and put my legs back up on that pillow, like the mile circuit. I'll link that video below for y'all if you're interested in the mile circuit. So at 8 o'clock, so between 7 and 8, I remember trying to lay in the bed and I really couldn't go to sleep. I was just thinking about the labor, praying about the labor, but I wasn't in any much pain. Like it wasn't like I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't settle my mind to go to sleep. And I wish I could have, because I really would have enjoyed a little bit of rest. So I remember getting up a little bit to bounce on the birth ball, do some hip circles on the birth ball, do some side lunges up on a chair, just some things. And then at 8 o'clock, I still couldn't go to sleep, so I headed upstairs. I was like, okay, I might as well do a couple of stair walks as I go up to tuck the kids into bed while I'm going up here. So that was all between 7 and 8. And at this point, I forgot to mention, at 7, I did text the midwife. My midwife lives 2 hours away, and she actually missed the birth last time because of that. She came to check on everything, and we didn't think that labor was progressing in my last birth, but contrary to what y'all thought, right after she left, things picked up like crazy, and I had a baby within 2 hours. She missed the birth. So I remember thinking this labor was so similar to my last one. It was very slow at the beginning. I was having these very short, mild contractions, and I just knew that things were about to pick up when the kids went to bed, because again, like I said, whenever my body knows that everyone's in bed, tucked in, relaxed, it seems like that's when I go into labor. Now, I really want my kids at one of our births. They want to be at the birth, but it just hasn't happened yet. My body just must know that it needs the peace, the less chaos of my very young children, and they don't need to be at the birth just yet. It's obviously what I've come to conclude, because they haven't made it to my last 2 births that I've wanted them to be at if they were able to. So nonetheless, at 7 o'clock, I did text the midwife and was like, okay, I don't know if things are really picking up that much, but I would feel better if you were just here in case things picked up when the kids went to bed. So at 7 o'clock, I texted her, knowing she wouldn't be here till close to 9. So at 9 o'clock, everyone arrived, and I remember thinking, okay, this is gonna be, I don't like being watched when I'm in labor. It's just a thing for me. I like to be alone or with my husband. So I knew if I got all these people here too early, it might stall out. And I was really nervous about that. But again, on one hand, I didn't really want people here, but on the other hand, I wanted them here in case things picked up fast, because I knew there was travel times and distances for all of these people to arrive. Now, she checked baby's heartbeat. She checked blood pressure and all that. We didn't do any cervical checks because I don't really like those unless I really feel a need that they need to happen during labor. So she did all that. Baby sounded fine, but he was still very high up. She did some belly mapping on my belly, and she could still feel his head was all the way outside of my pelvis. It hadn't dropped into the pelvis at all. So she did not tell me that at the time. She told me that later after the fact, just so I wouldn't be frustrated. So she suggested that I either just relax in the bed and they'll all just hang out in the living room and chat. They need to take a nap, they will, while I rested, or that I could get on the peanut ball. So if you've never heard of the peanut ball, it's basically like a big exercise ball, a blue exercise rubber ball, but it's shaped like a peanut. So it has like a little dip in it for you to rest your thighs. So the point of the peanut ball is to put you in a very relaxed lying down position, but hold your pelvis open as if you were doing a deep squat. So squats are great for opening the pelvis, getting the pelvis ready for birth. I've done tons of squats, deep squats, that is spinning babies routine that I've talked so much about during pregnancy. So I knew that this would be beneficial, hopefully. So I got on the peanut ball, and my goal was to do 30 minutes on the left side, 30 minutes on the right side, or stay on each side for 3 contractions, because peanut ball can be very uncomfortable to sit there through contractions. Your hips are stacked, your shoulders are stacked, you're lying on your side, and you're trying to rest and just breathe through contractions. So I got on the peanut ball, so immediately contractions picked up. They were not unbearable, but I was starting to shake a little bit. My hands would shake, my feet would shake. My doula sat in here with me and played some really relaxing music for me. They immediately got more difficult because that pelvis was opened. It was allowing baby to drop down into the pelvis, start dilating that cervix much quicker. And they were more uncomfortable, but they were not unbearable. So I was able to lay there for 6 contractions for 30 minutes. So I did the math there. That was only a contraction every 5 minutes. So that's still not really that close together. So I remember thinking, okay, I just did 6 contractions pretty easily, and it took 30 minutes. We're still pretty far off from baby getting here. So they came back after 30 minutes and asked me if I wanted to flip over to the other side. So we flipped over to the left side. My challenge was to do 30 minutes on that side or 3 contractions. I'd just done 30 minutes on the right side. I was like, I can totally do 30 minutes on the left side. So I turned over and immediately the first contraction hit, and it was unbearable. I was moving, I was trying so hard to relax, but I could not relax in that state. My muscles were tensing up, and if you know anything about contractions, if you don't want to tense up, they make them much more painful. You want your jaw relaxed, your hands relaxed, your feet relaxed, your whole body. You really want to be relaxed and able to just kind of move through them or relax through them, or they are a lot more painful. Well, I could not do that on this peanut ball. So I immediately finished that contraction and got up and walked to the bathroom. I thought I needed to go to the restroom, so I headed to the bathroom. In the midst of walking to the bathroom and using the restroom, I had, I think, at least 1 or 2 contractions. At this point, I was not writing much down because things were picking up and I wasn't really focused on my phone. So I'm going off of memory here. But I went to the restroom, I came out of the restroom and told the midwife I could not lay there for another contraction on that left side. It was too painful. And she's like, okay, that's great. Things must be progressing. She's like, just make a few walks around the house, a few laps around the house, just kind of relax. And if you want to get back on the ball, you can try it, or we can just see what happens. So I made a loop through the living room, around the hall. And as I was doing all that, I was watching my husband fix a snack in the kitchen. I made some homemade ice cream the day before, that Sunday, and he was fixing a little bowl of homemade ice cream to sit down and just relax. And as he was telling me what he was doing, I said, okay, come here. He was like kind of caught off guard because I don't really need his support a lot during contractions. I usually kind of manage them on my own, but sometimes when they get really intense, I just like his closeness and his presence. So he had just seen me completely fine for the peanut ball. He didn't know they were picking up when I went to the restroom. I had not told him yet. And he was like, okay, and he ran over to me and I grabbed onto his shoulders and just started swaying through contractions. He was like, are they already getting that intense? I was like, yes, I might need your help soon. So finish your ice cream pretty quick because I may need you to come be with me. And so he was like, okay. So he headed back 10 feet across the kitchen to get his bowl of ice cream. And within him walking away from me to the ice cream, I started having another one. I was like, okay, come back. And that second contraction I had with him right in the kitchen, I started like the deeper J tones, as they call them, just that deeper moaning that your body naturally will start to do as your contractions lengthen and strengthen in intensity and time. So I was immediately starting those deeper tone contractions, and my midwife heard me from across the living room. And she said she knew things were about to pick up because they were now just coming on really fast. So I came back into the bedroom, right here on the bed, asked my husband and midwife. At this point, he realized he was going to have to help me, but he was going to just put his ice cream in the fridge and then help me get on the peanut ball and then go back and eat the ice cream real quick. So he came in here with me. My doula was already in here. They helped me get on the peanut ball for the left side, and he headed back to get his ice cream, never to make it back. So his ice cream was still sitting in the refrigerator, just melting. So they got me on the peanut ball and I immediately started having another contraction, and again, it was unbearable. So I was able to get through that contraction very, very difficultly. I wasn't able to really relax. It was very difficult I really like to sway and move through contractions, either standing or leaning over or on all fours, and this peanut ball was just not a comfortable position for a contraction. So it did its job of opening the pelvis, helping baby drop down, dilate the cervix, and now baby was pretty much about to be born at this point. We didn't know it was going to be this quick. So this was at about 10:25. So from 9:30 to 10:25, almost an hour, I was on the peanut ball, walking around the house, doing things such as that. So at 10:25, I was like, okay, help me up off this ball. So my husband helped with one arm, my doula helped with one arm, because I was still in a lot of tense pain from that last contraction on that peanut ball. As my doula and husband were helping me sit up, I felt a pop in the birth canal, and then I said, I think my water just broke, and at that point, water gushed on the bed. Thankfully, we had the bed protection on, the shower curtain and the extra sheets and all of that, because my water did break. And my doula saw it, and was like, yeah, that's your water, and she was just very encouraging and excited for me. So they held me up, and for the next 20 minutes, I stood beside the birth pool and just swayed. And at that point, when I stood up, I said, okay, y'all get the birth pool filled up. We had the birth pool blown up, we had the liner, we had the hose stretched across the house. All they had to do was turn on the water. Now the water only takes about 30 minutes to fill. We knew this from past experiences because with my first home birth, the birth pool was about half full before I had the baby. My last home birth, it never got filled because it was just my husband and I, and things happened super fast. If you didn't see that birth story, I'll link it below. So this birth, my water had broken. I was like, okay, we got about 30 minutes. Y'all fill the birth pool up. My husband was like, you think already? And I was like, yes, fill the birth pool. So the midwife assistant started filling the pool. They started out with hot water, getting it warm, and then we're gonna add cool water, and then usually hot water runs out, so they add cool water to finish filling it. So that was the plan. So for the next 20-ish minutes, 25 minutes, I stood beside the birth pool and just swayed with my husband through contractions. Now they were coming about every 30 seconds to a minute at this point, super fast, super strong. And the only thing that gave me comfort was standing there leaning on my husband. Now I wasn't like putting all my weight on him, like hanging on him. I was really just, it was more like we were just kind of swaying and dancing together. I was still like holding my weight up, but it's crazy how each labor is so different. Some of my labors, I would lean over and sway. Some of them I would lay in the bed and have a contraction. But this one, the most comfortable position was just leaning against his shoulder with my arms around his neck, him kind of holding my waist and just swaying. And it was just very comforting to have his presence, his smell, his comfort of him being there. And I just, like, that was how I got through those contractions, is just having him. And it was really a beautiful, intimate experience that I really love. And though we had people in the room with us, it was almost like it was just him and I there, and it was really special for me. So a couple of times he was constantly monitoring that pool, trying to figure out if he could help. He was asking the midwives if he could bring in some 5-gallon buckets of water to fill it faster, because he knew how much I wanted to get in that birth pool. So I remember him saying, okay, I'm gonna try to go get some buckets of water to fill the pool faster. And I was like, no, please don't leave me. I need you right here. So there was one contraction he did leave. I don't know what he went to do. I think he was checking on something for the water. And I had a contraction and I was like, where are you? I reached for my doula and she helped me get through that one. But it was really special having him like as a support there. And he's been a support in every one of my births, but my last birth, he was actually catching the baby. So I wasn't really like leaning on him through contractions. It's just crazy how your body craves something different in each labor. And this one, it just craved being next to him. And that was really sweet. So that was the next 25 minutes. At that point, I did go through transition. There was a point I felt nauseous. I asked for like a bag if I needed to throw up. Thankfully, I didn't. I always get nauseous right at transition, but I never actually throw up. Transition, I knew that it had hit because I felt nauseous. I was really getting really strong contractions at this point, every 30 seconds or less, super fast, super long. I was not getting much of a break between them. The pool is still filling up. So at this point, I'm hearing them like swirl water. They're trying to mix cool water in. They'd filled the water up to its point where it needed to be. Like I could have gotten in the pool, but they didn't realize how long our hot water was lasting, and it was too hot. So for a baby to be born in the pool, the water needs to be around 100 degrees. So our temperature was at 118. So it was way too hot for me to get in and for baby to be born into, because we didn't know how much longer we had. So they weren't gonna let me get into that really hot water. So we're trying to add cold water at this point. So I hear all this swirling around and I'm like, I remember just thinking, what is going on? Why can't I get into this pool? It's right here, it's filled up. So I keep hearing, what's the temperature? And I heard her say 118. And at a point, I was kind of like in and out of like what's going on. I was really in the zone with my husband and just focusing on these contractions. I was like, 118? Did they just check my temperature? Like it was just like this weird thought going through my head of temperature 118, and then I realized, okay, that's the water temperature. It took me a minute to kind of realize what they were saying. So the pool was filled, but the water was too hot. So we're now adding cold water to the pool to try to cool it off and swirl it around, incorporate the water to get it down to 100 degrees. So at this point, I started feeling pushy. I started to kind of moan through the contractions. My body just started involuntarily pushing baby. So I told him, I'm feeling pushy. Can I get into the water? And they're like, it's too hot. So that did not happen. I'm standing by the pool, starting to push. I'm sort of like bending down at this point, like my body's bearing down. And if you've ever felt fetal ejection, reflex, you can't stop it. When your body starts to push, you can't stop it. You can't just all of a sudden sit down and stop baby from coming down. And I did not know that with my first birth. They've kind of forced me to push. My body wasn't ready. I wish I had listened to the fetal ejection reflex, because with my last 3 births, I've had the fetal ejection, and it's so much easier than actually physically trying to push your baby. I know some women don't experience that, and I don't actually know what makes some women do and some don't, but I've always experienced it in my 3 home births, and it's really an interesting but strong feeling that you cannot resist. So all that being said, we are waiting on the pool to cool off. I'm now feeling pushy. My midwife is now asking me, do I want to transfer to the bed, because she does not want me to deliver standing up, because just babies are really slippery. Then it's hard for me to walk to the bed, the baby attached. It's just, there's a lot of things that aren't ideal for standing up delivering a baby. I know that that happens sometimes, but in the ideal situation, she's not want me standing to deliver the baby. So I either had the option to kneel on the floor or to crawl onto the bed on hands and knees. So at this point, the water birth was out because the water was not going to be cooled down enough. I think they got the water to 102. And my husband told me later, he was like, it's 102. Why can't she just get in? But at that point, my body was already pushing. My midwife knew I probably could not even crawl into the birth pool and get like my leg up over. I probably could have, but at that point, it just wasn't really an option. So I remember her saying, okay, we're not gonna be able to get into the water. It's not cool enough, but you've done this before. We know you don't need the water. Do you want to climb onto the bed? So I remember just this heart sinking feeling, because I've just longed to have a water birth. I just know it just seems so peaceful, the ones I've watched, but apparently my body is just not wanting that. Maybe eventually if we have another child, I'll get a water birth. But so I reluctantly crawled to the bed. Very difficult at this point because baby is pushing down into the birth canal. I feel like he was probably already partly in the birth canal at that point, because it was very hard to walk 5 feet from the corner of the bed onto the bed at that point. So I get onto hands and knees, and instantly it just felt wrong. At this point, it's about 10:50 in the evening, looking back at timestamps and stuff on footage. But at 10:50, so from 10:20 to 10:50, we went from probably active labor to about to push the baby out. So the active labor phase was super short, like 30 minutes. And then now we're at pushing at 10:50. So I'm on the bed. I remember trying to get comfortable on some pillows. That was not comfortable, putting my arms up. At one birth, I propped onto my husband, but that was not comfortable. Nothing was comfortable on hands and knees. I remember him coming down. I was asking the midwife, she was doing some warm compress to help with tearing, hemorrhoids, stuff like that. And I remember like every time I would have a contraction, I would feel like a bulge. And I was like, okay, is the head out? And she was like, no, they're just coming down. Keep breathing. You're doing a great job. Because I was for certain, as soon as I felt that first contraction on the bed, his head was out. But it wasn't. So for the next 10 minutes, I mentally fought through these contractions. I was pulling away from her. I was not relaxed. I was not in the zone. It was really mentally hard for me. My last 2 births, I did birth on hands and knees, and I was just calm. I was able to sit there calmly, breathe through contractions, but this time I was not. So something was different as far as either his position, the way, I don't really know. I haven't been able to pinpoint it yet. I just know that hands and knees was not comfortable for me to birth him as it was my last 2 daughters. So we wondered if maybe his hand was up when he first came into the birth canal, and then through a contraction it slid down. We're not really sure, because my midwife mentioned that because of something, how he put his hand up right when he was born. We don't really know, but all I know is I was praying so hard that I would be able to get through this pushing phase, because it was very difficult. And the Lord met me. He had my midwife, basically, he spoke to my midwife. At one point I was really pulling away. My husband's up on my head, wiping my face, kind of like cooling me off, trying to help me stay calm. My midwife leaned over and said, Amy, your baby is so close to meeting you. I just need you to be calm, breathe, and don't pull away. And it just like this peace from the Lord instantly came over me from her saying that. My husband leaned over and like kissed my cheek. It was just a really special moment that God spoke to me through both of them in that moment before our baby was born. It gives me tears just to think about it. So at that point, it was right before he crowned. Again, I'm thinking he's crowning this whole time because of the pressure and the intenseness I'm feeling. And I don't remember feeling that in my last 2 home births on hands and knees. So it was a really mental struggle. And I remember at one point I said, please get this baby out. Like just calling out to the Lord to help this baby get out, because it was a lot more intense than my last 2 as far as the pushing phase. The early labor and the contraction part was very similar to my last 2, but this pushing phase was so different. So anyways, for the next 10 minutes, I'm on hands and knees pushing. And then the last contraction, I don't know what came over me, but all of a sudden I pulled up onto my husband's shoulders and went up into an upright position, pulled my leg into a runner's lunge. So one leg was on knees, one leg was up into a runner's lunge, and that's when his head came out. So it's like your body just knows. I don't remember thinking, okay, let me get into an upright position to birth the baby. My body just instinctively pushed myself up into that position and his head was born. So I've talked about this so much in pregnancy videos past, listening to your body, instinctively doing what your body is telling you to do. You don't really have to even think about it. You'll know what position to get in. So hands and knees was not the position for me this birth. It's been my position for the last 2 births, but it was not this birth. My body pushed me into that position. His head almost immediately came out. The midwife grabbed it a little bit and said, do you want to catch your baby? Because she knew that was one of my wishes this time. I had hoped to be in the birth pool to catch him, just me and the baby. We did not know the gender. But I remember her asking, do I want to catch the baby? And at that moment, it was so intense. I was like thinking, do I want to catch the baby? And then I just instinctively reached down and caught him and put him into my chest. So he was actually born head. I grabbed him and like completely came out. He didn't actually, he basically just slid out with him. Whereas in my last 2, their head was born, they rotated, shoulders were born, baby was born. I know some women go through like 3 or 4 contractions between head and the whole baby being born, but his head came out, she grabbed it, I immediately grabbed it, and he was onto my chest. So it was really fast, really intense, the last part, but there was such a relief after he was out. And instantly, if you've given birth, you know that relief you feel of the baby being out and them in your arms and you looking at them. So it was just like this most beautiful joy, seeing him, pulling him up to my chest. This was my first baby that I've actually caught myself. Mostly the midwife, of course, helped support him because I was like in an upright position on one leg. So of course they didn't want me to fall over or anything. The doula was trying to make sure I was supported. My husband was making sure baby was supported. Everyone was like kind of hands-on, but I was essentially the one that grabbed him and pulled him up to my chest. So that was super special. So we did not know the gender. I pulled him up to my chest very carefully, not looking at gender. Once he cried, everything, in the midst of them like drying him off, my doula went and got my son because the plan was for him to be at the birth, but again, it was now 11 o'clock at night, and they were asleep. And at one point, my husband did say, do you want me to go get the kids? As I was about to be pushing. And I remember thinking, no, I do not want my kids here at this moment. Just the intensity that I was feeling, I did not need any other distractions from my children. So I wish they had been able to be there, and they still ask why they didn't get to be at the birth, and I just explained to them that it just didn't work out that way. So anyway, my doula went and got my son to bring him down first so he could announce the gender to us. And when he came back down, he sat beside me, baby was crying. We lifted his leg and told us his gender, and it was the most special reaction. My husband had really wanted a boy, but he was set that this was a girl. He just kept having a feeling of girl. Now, deep down, I had felt like it was a boy because I knew our family really wanted another boy. And I was just thinking God was going to bless us with another little boy, but I wasn't quite sure I fully believed it. But of course, always believe your intuition from God because He knows what you need and when you need it. So when He announced that it was a boy, just tears flooded down my face and my husband's face. I remember looking at him. It was the most beautiful moment of looking at him hearing that he had another son. So we were all very excited about that. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience after that. The photographer showed up right as we announced the gender. She was very close. We didn't actually call her in time because things picked up so fast. So our photographer got here and snapped some beautiful pictures of our first moments meeting him. My daughter got to come down, then my second daughter woke up in the midst of getting my first daughter down. And so at one point we had the whole family down here meeting our little baby, and then they slowly trickled back up to bed. So it was just, that's what I love about home birth, is just sitting in your bed, relaxing with your family or with your husband, whoever you want there. The midwives, the doula, they all leave for like the next hour to 2 hours and just give you that moment with your new baby, with your spouse, with your children, if they're around. And it's just so beautiful and relaxing. So I absolutely love our birth story. There were some challenges, but God definitely met me through those and used the people that were at my birth team to be with me, to support me, to comfort me through those moments. And I just felt his presence the entire time. It was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And it's actually crazy, I've been thinking about this. After my last birth, it was just my husband and I, my midwife didn't make it. I remember thinking how beautiful of an experience that was. And I was like, do I want to have another birth with just him and I? Because I thought it was such a beautiful, intimate experience, or just our family, my kids. But I remember thinking, after this birth, I couldn't have imagined, we would have made it if it had just been my husband and I, of course. God would have met us in that situation. But the way things played out, and just the peanut ball, we wouldn't have had a peanut ball if my midwife had not been here. But just the intensity of the pushing phase, I feel like I would have been a lot more anxious with the way this pushing phase felt if my midwife had not been here. Just the way the pushing phase felt this time, a lot more intense. I would have been a lot less comfortable if she had not been here. Now I know God would have given us grace and peace in the moment if it had just been my husband and I again, but I am grateful that this birth played out and we did have our birth team here. A lot of people will come at me and say that it's unsafe to birth without a midwife, which I know there's cases where it could be, but there's a situation, and I know that God watches over each situation. And in my last birth, there was no need for the midwife to be there, because my daughter came out so easily. She pinked up immediately. It was like the most beautiful experience, and my midwife wasn't needed at that birth. We would have loved to have had her there, but he knew in that birth that my husband and I could handle it. Now this birth was a lot more intense in the pushing. It was a lot longer in the pushing. My last birth was like 1.5 to 2 minutes of actually pushing. This birth was closer to 10. I know that's still very short. There's women that push for hours in the pushing phase, and I'm so grateful that this was a quick pushing phase, but just the intensity of that, I'm just so grateful that God allowed our birth team to make it and to be there to support and to comfort, and their comforting presence was there for this birth. So it's just beautiful to think how he orchestrates each birth in the way that he knows you need it. So I'm so grateful we had our birth team this time, that we still had such intimate moments, my husband and I, with the birth team all around us. But then when I needed them, when I needed their support, their comfort, they were here. It's just lovely having another woman, or several other women, that have birth, that know the beauty of birth, just to have them in your presence to help you birth. And I didn't have that with my hospital birth. All of my nurses were great, my first hospital birth, but they had never seen a natural birth. They had never had a natural birth. So it was very foreign for them to try to help me and coach me and empathize with me through that first birth. Whereas at this birth, I had that in those women and my doula, and it was just absolutely beautiful. My husband was still there. He was still loving and present through it all. And we got to meet our beautiful little son, who is conked out right now. But our son was so excited. If you saw our last birth story, he was a little disappointed at first when he found out our daughter was his sister. I remember him saying, I really wanted it to be a boy. I really wanted a brother. So he was so excited. He is still so excited to have a little brother now. And they are all just so in love with him. And we are so in love with him. We've had just the most beautiful, almost 2 weeks with him now in our family. And are all just so in love. So I didn't actually tell you his name. This is Arliss McCoy, our fourth little baby, our second son. We now have a boy, girl, boy, and just are so in awe of the beauty that God has blessed us with. So I hope y'all enjoyed hearing our birth story. I will have my birth vlog with actual footage next week, possibly the next. I'm so grateful for such beautiful home birth experiences that we have been so blessed to have. So I thank y'all for listening to this birth story, sharing this new little bundle of joy with us, and I will see y'all soon with some more postpartum content, how I've been healing, how I've been resting, foods, nourishment, and then just the homemaking life, motherhood life with a newborn in the midst of gardening season. So that has been fun for sure. But I've been so excited to share this story with y'all, and just thank y'all so much for your prayers, your love, and your support through this last pregnancy, through your prayers for the birth and the delivery, and it just means so much to us. So I will talk to y'all soon.